The sky above Earth was not dark, yet it carried a shadow no human had ever seen. In orbit, massive ships hovered silently, their surfaces gleaming with unknown metals. Each one bore the sigil of the Dragon Empire, a symbol that struck fear across countless star systems. They did not come to trade. They did not come to negotiate. They came because Vale-Ruth Ashbourne, the Dragon Emperor, had set his eyes on Earth. Vale-Ruth was no ordinary dragon. His wings were like storms frozen in crystal, his scales shimmered with colors that no human language could name, and his eyes burned like twin suns. He had conquered worlds, crushed armies, and humiliated empires. Nothing in the galaxy had ever made him pause. Nothing, until now. On Earth, new systems could not capture him properly. Satellites recorded streaks of light and energy, but the true scale of Vale-Ruth was beyond comprehension. Governments scrambled their fleets. Scientists measured anomalies in gravity and radiation, but calculations failed. Panic swept across continents, yet no human could fully imagine what faced them. World leaders gathered in underground bunkers, voices tight with fear. "He will destroy us," said the representative from North America. "We cannot match his technology or strength." Europe argued about alliances, while Asia insisted on evacuations. But no plan was enough. Every weapon, every defense, every fleet seemed tiny compared to the shadow in orbit. Meanwhile, ordinary humans went about their lives, unaware of the scale of what hovered above. Children played in parks, lovers walked under starlit skies, and workers returned home after long shifts. But above them, the Emperor watched. He was curious in his own ancient way, not about the humans' weapons, or their leaders, or their gold. He was curious about something smaller, something subtle that no empire had ever dared to show him. The first fleet to approach the Emperor was obliterated before it reached the edge of Earth's atmosphere. It was not destroyed by fire or explosion, but by sheer force of presence. The ships seemed to melt, their metals bending like soft clay, their energy fields collapsing as if the Emperor's gaze itself unmade them. Panic rippled through the remaining fleets. Orders were shouted, warnings issued, but nothing changed. Vale-Ruth was indifferent. He did not seek death or surrender. He only observed. Inside the United Nations Temporary Council chamber, a young delegate whispered, "Why doesn't he attack? Why hasn't he made his demand?" No one answered. Their eyes were on the screens, trying to catch a glimpse of the impossible. They could see the scales, the wings, the eyes, but not the mind. The Emperor's mind was a puzzle no human had ever solved. Vale-Ruth landed on the largest island in the Pacific, his body so immense it cast a shadow across the oceans. Waves crashed like frightened children, and the wind from his wings tore through forests. Birds fell from the sky. Earthquakes rolled beneath the soil. Humanity had never witnessed such power in a living creature. Soldiers raised their guns, but the weapons looked tiny in their hands, insignificant against the sheer scale before them. The Emperor roared once, a sound that shook mountains and rattled windows 1,000 kilometers away. But he did not attack. Instead, he spread his wings and tilted his head, as if studying the people beneath him. Something about their fear, their determination, their fragility, intrigued him. He had destroyed empires, but he had never understood them. Earth's humans were different. Their fear was genuine, but beneath it, there was resilience, stubbornness, and a strange kind of hope. For the first time in centuries, Vale-Ruth wondered if a species could interest him without needing to be conquered. He did not speak their language, but he did not need words. He could feel their intentions, their thoughts, their hearts. And what he felt in the humans of Earth was something no empire had ever shown him, smallness paired with courage. In the streets of New York, people watched the sky in disbelief. Families clutched each other, and children pointed upward, laughing nervously at the giant shadow that filled the air. News broadcasts struggled to describe what was happening. "A dragon, no, the Dragon Emperor, is on Earth. We cannot explain why he has not attacked," one reporter stammered. Governments were frozen. Militaries were paralyzed. Humanity's fate seemed to hang by a thread. Yet in the chaos, a strange calm began to grow. People stopped running. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Something about the presence of Vale-Ruth demanded attention, but not immediate destruction. There was respect, instinctive and raw, even from those who had only moments ago prayed for their lives. It was as if the world understood that this was not an enemy in the usual sense. The Emperor moved slowly through the sky, each beat of his wings sending gusts that uprooted trees and toppled vehicles. He did not look for treasures or weapons. He did not roar at the leaders who scrambled to appease him. His gaze swept over the oceans, the cities, the forests, and something flickered in his mind, a memory of something long forgotten. A world where dragons and humans had once crossed paths, not as conquerors and victims, but as beings capable of trust and admiration. Humanity held its collective breath. The fear of annihilation mixed with curiosity. Who could face this creature and survive? Who could speak to him? The answer seemed impossible. And yet, for the first time in his life, the Dragon Emperor had paused, not out of mercy, not out of weakness, but because he had noticed something unusual. In a quiet corner of a ruined city, a small figure watched from the shadows. A child, unnoticed by armies and observers alike, held a scrap of paper. The Emperor did not know it yet, but this child would do what no empire, no fleet, and no gift could ever do. And the first spark of a new story, a story that could change the galaxy, was quietly beginning in the hands of someone the universe had almost forgotten. Vale-Ruth Ashbourne, the Dragon Emperor who feared nothing, had finally paused. And in that pause, the fate of Earth hung in a delicate balance, one that no weapon could decide, only one small human heart could shape. The city lay in ruins. Smoke rose from broken buildings, streets were cracked, and cars were overturned as if some invisible hand had thrown them aside. Most humans had fled, hiding in shelters and bunkers, or aboard hastily assembled ships that hovered in orbit. Yet amid the chaos, one small figure moved carefully, unnoticed by soldiers, media, and even the massive shadow of the Dragon Emperor above. Elia Cade was 12 years old, thin and pale from weeks without proper food. His clothes were ragged, his shoes worn through, but his eyes were sharp. He had survived the orbital attacks, the collapsing buildings, and the panic that had overtaken the world. His parents were gone, taken by the wars that humans had fought against themselves, leaving him alone in a city no longer safe. He had seen the dragons before, though only briefly. When pirates tried to raid his city, massive scales and claws had appeared in the sky, cutting through the attackers with swift precision. A great dragon had saved him, though he did not know why. Now, as he looked up at Vale-Ruth hovering above the ocean, he remembered that day. The memory filled him with a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. Elia carried a small scrap of paper and a broken pencil. It was nothing important, just what he had found in the rubble of a school library. But he had an idea, a thought so simple it almost embarrassed him. He would draw a picture. Not of dragons, not of weapons, not of the destruction around him, but a picture of thanks. He wanted the dragon to know that someone remembered the kindness it had once shown. He settled in a quiet alley and began to draw. His hands shook from hunger and cold, but he pressed the pencil to the paper. A large dragon shielded tiny humans from flying rocks. The humans waved, smiling, and the dragon's eyes looked gentle, almost tired. Elia drew as best as he could, ignoring the fear that still hung in the air, ignoring the roar of the waves and wind from the Emperor's wings. 4 hours, he worked in silence, unaware of the eyes of the galaxy watching from orbit, unaware that the smallest act of gratitude could carry power greater than weapons. When the drawing was finished, Elia folded it carefully. He had nowhere to go. No one would see it in the bunkers or the ships, and he had no way to leave the city safely. But the child had an idea that no army or fleet had considered. He would give it to the Emperor himself. The journey was dangerous. Debris blocked streets. Radiation spikes from damaged satellites flared unpredictably. Military patrols fired at anything moving. Elia hid in shadows, crawled through broken buildings, and moved across rooftops when streets became impossible. Hunger clawed at his stomach, exhaustion weighed his limbs, but he did not stop. He had a mission, simple and pure, to give thanks. Finally, he reached the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean. The Emperor floated above the water, massive wings spreading storms across the waves. The humans nearby were frozen, soldiers too small to act, leaders too scared to speak. Elia's heart pounded in his chest, but he took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding the paper high. "Please," he whispered, almost to himself, "thank you." Vale-Ruth turned his head. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Emperor lowered one enormous claw, hovering in the air with precision that could crush mountains. The humans froze, certain the child would be destroyed instantly. But the claw stopped inches from Elia. Vale-Ruth's eyes, burning with the light of distant suns, looked directly at him. The child's voice trembled. I wanted to say thank you. You saved me once, even if you didn't know it. I don't have gold, or ships, or weapons. Just this." He held out the scrap of paper. "It's a drawing. I hope you like it." For the first time in centuries, Vale-Ruth paused, not because of fear, not because of strategy, but because of something new. No empire had offered him thanks without expectation. No fleet had shown gratitude without fear. And here was a human child, trembling, small, and fragile, holding out a gift that carried nothing but honesty. The Emperor's massive wings folded slightly, creating a gust that swept through the cliffside, lifting Elia's hair and clothes. The scales along Veilruth's neck shimmered in the sunlight, shifting colors as though the dragon were considering something beyond comprehension. Slowly, with movements that seemed impossible for something so huge, he extended a claw toward the child. Elia's fingers trembled as he passed the paper into the dragon's grasp. Veilruth lowered his head, bringing his enormous eyes close. The Emperor's gaze was intense, powerful, but it carried no malice. He tilted his head, inspecting the drawing. The simple lines, the crude shapes, the human perspective, it was imperfect, but it was genuine. Veilruth let out a low rumble, almost like a purr. No roar, no destruction, just sound, a sound the humans nearby had never heard from a dragon before. Soldiers and leaders stared, mouths open. The child had done what no ambassador, no fleet, no gift of gold could do. He had touched something inside the Dragon Emperor that had been untouched for centuries. Then Veilruth did something even more surprising. He leaned closer to Elia and, without a word, lowered a massive claw to hover near him. Not in threat, but in invitation. The child's heart nearly stopped. He had expected destruction, but instead, the Emperor acknowledged him. The smallest human, unnoticed by the galaxy, had made contact with the mightiest being in existence. 4 hours, Elia and Veilruth remained on the cliffside. Humans below whispered in awe. News broadcasts struggled to describe what was happening. No one could explain why the Emperor did not attack, why he did not roar or demand tribute. The answer was simple, though too subtle for most to understand. A human child had given him something priceless, honest thanks, unaccompanied by fear or expectation. And in that moment, the world began to change. Not with war. Not with gold. Not with weapons. But with a hand-drawn card and the courage of a small child who believed that gratitude, even in the smallest form, could reach the stars. Veilruth, the Dragon Emperor who had feared nothing, had found something new, a reason to pause, to watch, and to consider. And Elia, the orphaned human, had found his place in a story far greater than he had ever imagined. The galaxy waited, silent and trembling. Something was beginning, something no one had predicted. A single act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that could change everything. And the child, small and unnoticed, had started it all. Veilruth Ashbourne hovered above the ocean, the sun reflecting off his vast, shifting scales. The hand-drawn card rested carefully in his massive claw, and he studied it as if it contained a secret the galaxy had hidden from him. Lines of pencil, rough shapes, a dragon shielding humans, simple, imperfect, but full of meaning. 4 centuries, no gift had ever held such weight. Gold, rare metals, fleets, living treasures, everything the galaxy had offered was empty. This small scrap of paper carried something real. Below, humans watched in awe. Soldiers and leaders could not believe what they were seeing. The Dragon Emperor had paused, not in anger, not in hunger for conquest, but in quiet observation. His eyes, burning like twin suns, scanned the card, then flicked toward the child who had given it. Elia Cade stood trembling, his small hands folded, hoping he had done the right thing. Veilruth had never experienced gratitude in its pure form. Empires gave tribute to gain favor, gifts were handed with fear in their hearts, and no being had ever given thanks without wanting something in return. Elia's card was different. There was no fear, no bribes, no hidden messages. Only a simple, human truth, thank you. The Emperor's gaze softened slightly. In his long life, he had known power, control, and domination, but he had never felt the subtle force that moved through this child. The card made him remember a time long ago, before conquest and war, when dragons had been guardians. Protectors of life, not destroyers. He had almost forgotten that memory, buried under millennia of conquest. Elia dared to speak again. I know I'm small. I know I cannot give you gold or jewels. But I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. You saved people, you saved me. His voice was shaky but clear, carried by courage that no human army could match. Veilruth shifted slightly in the air, the sound of wings brushing wind over the cliffs like distant thunder. He did not speak, but something in the way he tilted his head and narrowed his eyes told Elia he was listening. Every movement was deliberate, heavy with meaning. The child realized, for the first time, that this massive being was not just alive, he was thinking, choosing, feeling. The generals who accompanied Veilruth were confused. No words passed between them and their emperor, but they knew the pause was unusual. Their history, spanning thousands of worlds, had never prepared them for a creature who could hesitate because of gratitude. Some whispered among themselves, unsure whether to strike the child, unsure whether the pause was weakness. Vale Ruther's stare, burning into the ocean and the city alike, answered their questions without words: do nothing. Elia felt a shiver run through him, but he did not step back. Instead, he took another small scrap of paper and began to draw again. This time, he sketched the dragon and himself together, standing not in fear, but side by side. It was still crude, still simple, but it carried his message: I remember. I care. I am grateful. Vale Ruth extended a claw slowly, hovering near the second drawing. The humans below gasped. No one had ever seen the Emperor interact this way with a human, especially one so small. The gesture was enormous in meaning. In one motion, Vale Ruth accepted not a gift of wealth or power, but a gift of honesty and remembrance. The card, now doubled with both drawings, seemed to shimmer against the sunlight. For Vale Ruth, it was not the paper that mattered. It was the truth behind it. Humans, this fragile species, had something he had never valued: the ability to feel gratitude for kindness without expecting anything in return. That quality, simple as it seemed, carried more weight than entire fleets, more than armies or planets. The Emperor's immense wings shifted, stirring storms in the nearby ocean. Waves crashed against cliffs, birds scattered, and the wind tore through ruined streets. Humans clutched each other in fear, but no harm came to Elia. Vale Ruth had made a choice, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as a being who had recognized something profound. Leaders on Earth began to whisper among themselves. Could it be possible that humanity's smallest voices mattered more than their largest weapons? Could one child, unnoticed by the galaxy, truly influence a being of such power? The question made hearts pound and heads spin. Vale Ruth lowered his massive head closer to the child. He did not speak, but a sound rumbled deep in his chest, a vibration that felt like both a warning and a promise. Elia understood it in a way humans rarely could: he was safe. His thanks had been received, and more than that, it had mattered. The child smiled tentatively, unsure if he was imagining the connection. But when Vale Ruth's eyes softened just a little more, and the dragon nudged the card with a claw as if acknowledging its importance, Elia realized he had reached the impossible. He had touched the Emperor's mind, the most guarded mind in the galaxy, not with threats or bribes, but with honesty. News broadcasts tried to capture what was happening, but words failed. Reporters stammered: the Dragon Emperor has paused. He accepted a gift. A human child's drawing. Governments scrambled to understand, to analyze, to make sense, but the truth was simple: a child's act of gratitude had shifted the course of history. Vale Ruth lifted into the sky, hovering above the ocean with Elia below, and gazed at humanity. In that moment, he began to understand them: not their fleets, not their weapons, not their gold, but their hearts. The Emperor realized that the galaxy had misjudged this fragile species. Humans were small, yes, but inside them was a kind of courage and truth no empire had ever shown him. For Elia, the world was larger than he had imagined. One scrap of paper, a broken pencil, and his courage had carried him farther than any fleet. He had faced the most powerful being in the galaxy and not been destroyed. The Emperor, who had rejected every treasure and every gift, had accepted the simplest one of all: a hand-drawn card filled with thanks. Vale Ruth paused again, this time higher in the sky, his eyes sweeping across the oceans, cities, and forests. The generals waited, the humans below watched, and the child stood trembling but proud. Something was changing in the galaxy, something that no weapon could measure. And it began here, with gratitude that should have meant nothing, but instead meant everything. The Dragon Emperor who feared nothing had felt something new: recognition, understanding, and a flicker of something long forgotten: respect for a species that could give thanks without fear. And for the first time in centuries, Vale Ruth considered not what he could take, but what he could learn from the humans below. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. A small human, unnoticed by fleets and empires, had begun a story that could change everything. And Vale Ruth, ancient and mighty, had begun to listen. The galaxy was silent, though it had never been more alive with fear and curiosity. Fleets from distant empires hung in orbit, engines humming, weapons ready, waiting for a command they could not guess. Every being who had ever heard of Vale Ruth Ashbourne, the Dragon Emperor, watched, held in suspense. He had conquered worlds, crushed armies, and rejected treasures beyond imagining. And yet, above Earth, he paused. The pause had begun with a child. Elia Cade, small and alone, had given him a hand-drawn card, and the Emperor had accepted it. That act had shifted something no one understood. Generals whispered among themselves, debating what to do. Should they attack? Should they retreat? Was this weakness, or a test? Veilruth did not answer. He did not roar. He only observed. On Earth, leaders convened in emergency councils. They studied the dragon, trying to understand why he did not destroy them. He is testing us, one diplomat said, voice shaking. But for what? And why? Others argued that Earth should prepare for war, that any sign of hesitation would be fatal. Yet none had an answer. Not even the smartest minds in the galaxy could predict the Dragon Emperor's intentions. Elia, the child who had started it all, moved carefully through the ruined city. Soldiers and civilians glanced at him but did not stop him. Something about the boy made people feel small, yes, but also hopeful. He had done what no fleet, no weapon, no ambassador had ever done. He had touched the Emperor's attention without fear, without expectation, without desire for reward. Veilruth hovered above the Pacific Ocean, wings beating slowly, stirring massive storms in the waves below. He looked not at the humans' weapons or ships, but at their actions. He had watched them rebuild, share food, help the wounded, and care for strangers in the chaos. He observed families protecting one another, soldiers risking themselves to save civilians, scientists risking everything to stabilize damaged satellites. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were persistent, and they were honest in ways no empire had ever been. The Emperor's generals grew uneasy. They whispered of fleets ready to fire, of planets that could be conquered before the humans learned to fight. Veilruth's silence angered them, but also held them in awe. For centuries, no being had commanded such attention without using force. And now, all the galaxy could do was wait. Elia felt the weight of the moment. He had given the Emperor something small, a scrap of paper, but it had changed everything. He began to understand that humans were being judged not by their power, but by their behavior. And that behavior, care, courage, honesty, was something the galaxy had never measured before. 4 hours, Veilruth floated above Earth, watching. The winds he stirred tore through forests, toppled buildings, and sent waves crashing against cliffs, but he did not destroy. He observed how humans responded, how they protected what they could, how they helped one another without thought of reward. Every act of kindness, every brave decision, every small effort to survive without harming others seemed to hold his attention. Humans in orbit were tense, holding their breath as they watched the Emperor. Communications channels were filled with questions, theories, and desperate warnings. He is not attacking, one commander said. But he is studying us. What does he want? What does he value? Others argued endlessly, but no one could know. Veilruth's decisions were his own, and no empire had ever been allowed insight into his mind. Elia, sitting on a cliff above the city, realized that the Dragon Emperor's interest had shifted. The card he had given was not powerful in itself. It carried no magic, no technology, no authority. It only carried truth. And the Emperor, despite all his might, responded to truth. That truth was something the galaxy had never understood about humans. Even in fear, even in danger, they could act with honesty and gratitude. Veilruth's pause became a lesson in itself. The galaxy began to notice. Ships held fire. Soldiers froze. Leaders reconsidered their plans. No one could challenge the Dragon Emperor, but no one could predict what he would do next. And that uncertainty created a tension unlike any war or negotiation had ever done. Below, humans whispered to each other. They did not understand the full meaning of what had happened, but they felt it. The smallest voice, a child, had touched the most powerful being in the galaxy. They began to see that bravery did not only come from weapons or armies, but from honesty, courage, and care. The Emperor's massive wings shifted again, casting long shadows across oceans and continents. He lowered his head, letting his gaze sweep over cities, forests, and seas. Something unspoken passed between him and the humans. He recognized their value not in what they could give, but in what they were willing to be. Their kindness, courage, and honesty mattered more than gold, weapons, or planets. Elia looked up, trembling but proud. The world was quiet, except for the wind and the distant roar of waves. Veilruth moved closer to the child, hovering just above the cliff, and nudged the card once more. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, simple and profound. The Emperor was showing the galaxy that he had seen and understood. Then, slowly, Veilruth spread his wings wide and lifted higher into the sky. Humans below watched, waiting for destruction, for fire, for judgment. But none came. Instead, he circled above the planet, his eyes observing, learning. For the first time, The galaxy saw the Dragon Emperor not as a conqueror, but as a being capable of understanding, capable of choice, capable of curiosity. In that silence, in that pause, the galaxy held its breath. No weapon could predict the next move, no fleet could dictate his choice. Only one small human had done what no empire ever could. Eliakade had given him a reason to pause, a reason to watch, and a reason to consider. Veilruth, the Dragon Emperor who feared nothing, had learned something new. The galaxy waited, silent and tense. Something was beginning, something beyond war and conquest, something that could change the balance of power forever. And it all started with the honesty and courage of one small human, unnoticed by armies, yet seen by the mightiest being alive. The world below realized the moment was not over. The story of humans and dragons was only beginning. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. And for the first time in history, a human's courage mattered as much as the mightiest dragon's strength. The galaxy waited, tense and silent. Fleets hovered in orbit, sensors focused on Earth, commanders clutching controls as if their hands could control what had already begun. Veilruth Ashborn, the Dragon Emperor, circled above the planet with massive wings that stirred storms across oceans and forests. No human weapon had touched him. No empire had commanded his attention. Yet something far smaller, far simpler, had captured his interest, a single human child and his hand-drawn cards. Eliakade stood on the cliff, the wind tearing through his hair. He held another scrap of paper, unsure if it would matter. The first card had paused the Emperor. The second, a small gesture of continued gratitude, had made him curious. Veilruth's eyes, burning with twin suns of intelligence and power, met the child's gaze. For the first time, Elia understood that his small actions had begun something far larger than himself. Across the galaxy, empires began to notice. Ships that had been ready to fire now hesitated. Leaders whispered, "The Dragon Emperor, he is observing them." Humans, no one could understand fully, but everyone could feel it. Something in humans mattered that they had never measured before. They were fragile. They were small. And yet, in ways no weapon could touch, they were significant. Veilruth landed carefully on the largest island in the Pacific, enormous wings folding around him as if to hide storms beneath his scales. Humans scattered, some running in terror, some frozen in awe. But Elia remained. The Emperor's presence was overwhelming, but he no longer radiated the threat of death. Instead, he carried curiosity, intelligence, and something the galaxy had never expected: respect. The Dragon Emperor lowered his head, massive eyes scanning the people below. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spoke. His voice rumbled across oceans and mountains, a sound that seemed to carry both power and understanding. "Humans," he said, "you have survived not because of your weapons, not because of your fleets, not because of your gold, but because of what you carry inside. You remember gratitude when no one is watching. You protect each other when no one can force you to. You are fragile, but you are strong in ways I have not seen before." The words shocked humans. Soldiers and leaders dropped to their knees, but not in fear, this time, in recognition. Across the galaxy, listeners recorded the moment, and messages spread faster than any fleet could travel. The Dragon Emperor had spoken of humans, not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals in spirit, measured not by firepower, but by courage, honesty, and gratitude. Elia stepped forward, holding out his hand-drawn cards. "I only wanted to say thank you," he said. "You saved me. You saved people. I don't have anything else." Veilruth lowered a claw, large enough to crush mountains, and touched the cards gently. He studied them, feeling the small, simple truth inside. "It is enough," he said. "It is always enough. You have given me more than any empire ever could. You have reminded me what it means to protect, to honor, and to care." The galaxy, silent until now, began to stir. Other empires realized that their assumptions had been wrong. Weapons could destroy, but weapons could not inspire, could not teach, could not carry truth. Humans had survived not because of fleets or armies, but because they carried values that even the Dragon Emperor could not ignore. Veilruth rose into the sky, spreading his wings. The storms calmed beneath him as he circled above Earth, and humans below watched, trembling with awe and hope. "I will not conquer you," he said. "I will not demand tribute. I will protect you. You are not powerful in the way the galaxy thinks, but you are strong in the ways that matter." The child, Elia, realized something incredible. One small act, a drawing, had not only saved him, it had saved Earth. The Emperor had accepted something far simpler than gold or weapons: honesty, courage, and gratitude. Humanity had proven that even the smallest beings could make a difference in a galaxy ruled by power. Leaders began to understand. Fleets lowered their weapons, diplomats stopped arguing, and humans started to rebuild, not from fear, but from understanding. The lesson was clear: force could not measure the worth of a species. Only their actions, small and genuine, could show what they truly carried inside. Vale Ruth landed again, this time in a quieter place, far from cities, where humans could gather without fear. He observed them, not as conqueror, but as guardian. The galaxy will remember, he said to no one in particular. Humans are strong because they remember truth when no one watches. They teach loyalty, courage, and gratitude. That is strength the stars cannot destroy. Elia watched the Emperor, realizing that he had done more than survive. He had reminded a being of unimaginable power that kindness mattered, even when no one demanded it. That lesson, the Emperor said, was more valuable than fleets, armies, or weapons. It was the kind of lesson that changed history, changed the galaxy, and changed how the stars would look at humans forever. The Dragon Emperor lifted into orbit, his massive wings beating slowly, not in anger but in thought. The galaxy had learned something new that day. Humans were not the strongest, but they were unforgettable. They could change the hearts of the mightiest beings. They could survive with courage. They could inspire gratitude and respect where no one had thought it possible. And Elia Cade, small and fragile, stood on the cliff, smiling. One scrap of paper, one act of courage, one honest heart had shifted the future. Humanity would not be measured by what they could take, or destroy, or conquer. They would be measured by what they could give without expectation, by what they could remember when no one watched, and by the truth they carried inside. The galaxy held its breath one last time, watching the Dragon Emperor depart. Ships lowered weapons, empires reconsidered strategy, and humans slowly realized that the stars were no longer enemies, they were witnesses. Witnesses to the courage of one small species that had changed the heart of the universe, and to the courage of one small child who reminded a godlike dragon what it meant to care. Vale Ruth Ashbourne, the Dragon Emperor who had feared nothing, now knew something new: the stars could learn from humans. And humanity, fragile but brave, would never be forgotten.